Bill was part of the outreach at Christ Church Cathedral. And we're lucky to have two very fine speakers today. Once again, we've been experimenting both with live and Zoom. So, some days better than others in terms of live. But it dawned on us that we hadn't done anything on the Cincinnati Public Schools since the early days of COVID. Schools were wrestling with what to do about the situation. And Bolton, who's a veteran member of the Cincinnati School Board, has joined us on several occasions in these forums and always gives tremendous insight into terms of what's going on. And we have Michelle Dillingham, who's an organizer of the Teachers Union here today, with her perspective, and also with a new ballot initiative, which is seeking signatures for this November. So we've got a lot to talk about, and two very fine speakers to do so. Oh, by the way, if you're concerned about that ballot initiative that the state is putting on, there's still time to contact your state rep. Apparently, it did pass the House, but it has not passed the Senate yet. But this would make it twice as hard for citizens to launch an initiative. So if you've got any influence or no influence, but want to contact your state rep, this is the time to do it. Because they're going into action. Well, I'm going to call, I think, Bolton initially. He's going to give an overview of what's been happening with the schools. So welcome.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Good just afternoon to everyone that's watching and everyone that's here. I'm really pleased to be here today, and it's been a while since we had this opportunity to talk about it's where it's at. Talk about the microphone. It's been a while since we've been able to talk about Cincinnati Public, but as all of you know, every day is a challenge.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. It does not pay to be short. I know that after a number of years of living as a short person. But today, when we talk about Cincinnati Public, I've been asked to hit some of the more significant things that have been happening, in part as a result of COVID, but also since COVID, as we phase out of COVID and into our future. So that's sort of where I'll linger for a while. And Bill will shut me off as soon as he possibly can. I know if we get too far afield. COVID was a tremendous challenge for all public institutions, and particularly a challenge for public schools. Is that better? We have our technician. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. At any rate, so let's get started, if we can, about Cincinnati Public. The COVID challenges for everyone, but particularly public schools, I think exacerbated and demonstrated and put the light on those things that were particularly wrong and particularly inadequate in public education. As simple as, does every child have a device? Could every child even do online? Or more particularly, did the powers that be within the private sector and public sector actually provide the services regarding having access to every neighborhood? Or did they only provide it to neighborhoods where there was a guaranteed profit? That's what we found out. We found out in COVID that not only did we have to and want to make sure that each of our students had a device that was theirs to take home and to use, but also we had to begin to subsidize the payments to the companies that provide the service, because in many of the neighborhoods where our students live, there was no service. And we continue as the best we can to do that. But what I'm really saying is that COVID showed us a list of to-do. We knew a lot of them, But what we didn't know was the severity or the extensive spread of some of the things we needed to worry about. Cincinnati Public has always been a leader in collaborative work, been a leader in full services for schools, like our community learning centers, but really not fully appreciating the fact that we do feed 36,000 kids. And if you don't have school, who's doing that? So that's a focus. We do provide not just the education and the instruction that is so essential for all students, but we also provide medical, dental, vision. If we're shut down, who does that? So when you even talk about the health concerns of COVID, we had health concerns related to COVID because health concerns like vision and dental and primary care were not being able to be delivered if we shut the schools down. And it was always a close vote on our 7-member board as to whether or not to keep the schools open or to close them or to offer some sort of hybrid or what can we actually do. But the most significant thing about COVID is that it gave us an opportunity basically and a very trying one to have a 360 review of what our district was able to do and what our district was not able to do. So that's sort of the lingering piece of COVID and has influenced our recent strategic plan that is now concluded. And it's very much influencing our strategic plan for the next several years that is about to start up after a year's work on the strategic plan. Now, beyond COVID, we also found out that we have in this marketplace, not just Cincinnati, but in this country, there was a problem regarding resources available to us and employees available to us. And a focus there on one of the biggest issues we have still confronting us, which is transportation. What we realized as the COVID experience happened literally simultaneously, we lost the services of sort of slash metro for our extra routes for our high school students. That was a big loss. But then to fix that loss, the reality was for us to realize that we didn't have in this community enough bus drivers or enough buses. And we had too many routes. And so the kids had to switch over to provided routes, regular routes. And that might be a great learning experience for many of our students. And it is a less expensive thing to do than we were doing. But the problem was it severely impacted, especially on the heels of COVID, our attendance rates in many of our schools. And we haven't gotten back to the kind of attendance that we want. And attendance now is, I know it sounds simple, but that's one of the top priorities for us, is to find a way to get our urban kids from all of our neighborhoods in Cincinnati and our surrounding area, because let me remind everybody, the district is larger than the city. It has some townships in it, it has villages, some little cities in it. And I think that's sometimes lost on many people. So transportation and attendance is a big focus. Another focus is that we have grown during this COVID time. It stopped for a little while, but as many of you know, with the passage of the preschool promise, we have now gotten to where there's over 2,000 more kids, CPS kids in CPS preschool classes. We have about 140 preschool classes as a result of the public-private partnership and the willingness of the voters to pass the preschool promise tax levy, which has now been renewed and is facing renewal in another couple of years as well. And that paid not only for many of our kids to be in preschool at CPS, but the historic thing is that it is also subsidizing many, many students in the private sector as well. And so we've grown our population in the preschool age, which shouldn't surprise us since I think Cincinnati has a long history of early childhood, one of the leading city districts in the country on kindergarten and full day kindergarten. So it's part of our tradition, but the preschool promise has really been an exceptional effort for both public and private providers. and has extended the enrollment. We've also had a tremendous enrollment increase in those students, those families, if you will, that are not using English as their primary language. Our ELL kids are one of the big expansions that we've had, and frankly, it's a big growth district-wide, but concentrated, as many of you would imagine, in certain areas, in certain schools. And so much so that we have to focus greatly in about 10 or 12 of our 65 or so schools. Maybe 15 or so of our 65 schools where there's such a large English second language population. And we welcome them, we welcome their families, and want to provide all the services imaginable. And an area that's doing very well with that is, as you would expect, the Community Learning Center Institute, that provides all sorts of welcoming services, as do we, but they also provide additional legal services as well for those families. And we're looking to expand our school ability to house more preschool kids, and also the expansion of the population within the ELL population, both on the east and also on the west side of our district. Another thing that I need to probably mention before we start to kind of close out my part so that we can do whatever else we have to do besides Michelle and me, is very importantly, there is an attack on public funding for education. We have been, as I think, fiscally responsible as imaginable, and I'm proud of that for us. Over these many years I've been on the board, but there's not been that many times where we've asked for new money, but you all have been able to, in great record numbers, to renew our levies and also face the kinds of challenges that costs present themselves in educating many of our kids. But this news assault, Michelle will be talking about some of the issues regarding our local forces and challenges. But there's a tremendous challenge, as many of you know, from our state legislature, which for all intents and purposes is just, I would call it Florida light. And I think we're just 2 or 3 steps away from being Florida heavy. Now that pertains not only to financing, which I'll talk about in just a second, but it definitely pertains to how we educate our children. To many of the people in Columbus, the majority party in Columbus, diversity is a dirty word, inclusion is a dirty word, and trying to educate kids and meet them where they are and treat them as valued individuals is not a priority of the state legislature of Ohio. And it's a very ugly thing, let alone the curriculum piece. You know, and I know that many folks in Columbus don't want us to teach children who they are or what they're about or where we all come from the standpoint of our own national history. That's not, for this social studies teacher, anything to even think about. We offer a full curriculum, and we are proud of that curriculum. And when the state didn't have a health curriculum we could adopt, we adopted the national health curriculum. So you have a very progressive district, and I'm sure we'll face those sorts of challenges from Columbus. But our greatest challenge right now from Columbus is the fact that they are expanding, increasing, widening, deepening the amount of money, public money, your money, that's going to be going to vouchers and private schools and religious schools and charters that they claim are public schools, which is the biggest lie ever. The reality is they believe that over the next several years, around $1.3 billion of public monies will go toward the vouchers for private, for charter, and for religious schools. And that will be money that we, in the public sector, will not be able to avail ourselves. There is a lawsuit now that Cincinnati, and I'm proud to say we've joined it and are helping pay for it, out of the over 600 school districts, about 138 school districts have joined the coalition that is fighting, and it's kind of called Vouchers for Ohio. And this coalition is in court now. It had a good victory in Franklin County that was going to be hard to repeat. But now we even have challenges not only from the state legislature and the state attorney general and the state auditor, challenging whether or not that coalition, which is also a similar coalition, updating all the way back to the Durrell case, where now the state legislature, state executive branch is challenging how that coalition is funding itself and how it's running itself. Plus, we also have just filed, they have just filed, opponents have filed believe it or not, it's called this, a quasher motion. And that quasher motion is to undo the fact that the summary judgment was won by us, is now progressing. And so the challenge is going to be financial. The challenge is to maintain public schools. And the greatest challenge is not necessarily the suburban districts or even some of our rural districts that are our great partners in all of this effort. But the real challenge is that there's a separate rule, a separate law, separate conditions that the state legislature and the State Board of Education and ODE have placed on those schools that are urban, with high poverty, with great diversity. There's separate rules for those, about 8 to 18 school districts, where we're even required to have different kinds of schools than the rest of the district statewide. So we are under assault from Columbus. We are fighting hard. The board is very adamant about protecting our children, our curriculum, and certainly our staff, and the great tradition of Cincinnati Public, which, by the way, we have now started the last several years for our bicentennial celebration as a school district. There's been a school board longer than there's been a city council. And on that, I'll leave and let Michelle start to do what she needs to do or take questions, whatever Bill says. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I can share a little for a little while, and then I think we could do Q&A after. It's open discussion. That would be fun. So thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I consider it home, Christ Church Cathedral, the Community Issue Forum. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, a union of professionals that represents educators at Cincinnati Public Schools. And in our mission statement, we champion social and economic well-being of our members and our children that we teach, families, communities of the city. And my favorite part of the mission statement, that includes many things, but one thing it includes also is political activism. And so we're really proud to participate in the issues of the day as it relates to issue and electoral politics, because it definitely impacts our kids and our students in our classrooms. So I just kind of jotted down a few of the main concerns that we work on regularly. I just thought I'd share with the community. We're always concerned about teacher staffing. We want to keep those classroom ratios low so our kids can have a good, productive classroom experience. I don't know if you've ever been in a classroom with doubled up with like more, 50 kids. It's pretty impossible to get much instruction done. So staffing is always something we spend a lot of time on. Staffing diversity. We want to have teachers and educators that reflect our students and their communities, and we want to be able to recruit and retain a good, diverse workforce. We have recently encountered a lot of change and a lot of, I would say, some issues with a huge shift in new leadership. We have a new superintendent, and she's brought in a whole lot of new folks, which happens with regime change, as you could say. What we work a lot on is making sure these new folks understand how to work productively with public sector union bargaining units, especially if folks are coming into our city working with our district who've never had to work with unions and public sector bargaining units. We really are heavy on shared leadership models in Cincinnati Public. We're real proud of that. We feel that productive labor management interactions are the best ultimately for production, just in any workforce, right? So you want to have a management and a union of professionals that's really on the same page and working together. Because ultimately, we don't want to see big shifts in upper management constantly. What we need is stability and really institutional knowledge and stability for our kids. So, I know some of you, have been reading the paper, the front page about the principals being dissatisfied with our new superintendent. I'll just say that what we're interested in is making sure that, everything's working smoothly, and that we're all kind of sharing together to make this all work for our kids. Eve Bolton touched on the transportation issue. It's been massive. You may remember the teachers union was very vocal when Metro was eliminating dedicated routes that had been in place for decades. We knew, the teachers knew that this was going to really be disruptive, and it has been. Their superintendent reports almost 20% of our children are still not making it to school on time. They've even considered changing the literal order of classes in the day because we can't rely on kids getting to that first class to get that critical material on time. So it's been hugely disruptive, and there's a lot of work to do on that, and we are all responsible. And when I say we, I'm talking about the county, the city, Metro, city council, the mayor, the school board, really needing to come together. What's disappointing is when certain factions say, well, we really don't have anything to do with that. That's not our concern. We should all be concerned about our children and the city getting to school on time and safely, and not taking 2 hours to have to get there. These are publicly funded services, transportation, our schools. We all have a stake. And so we really continue to push for solutions there. And of course, privatization, we're always concerned about the diversion of public funds over to private experiments on our kids. That's what we call them, these charters and vouchers, these backpack bills. Time and again, they have been proven to fail largely for most of our kids. And they're just a distraction. They're not best practices. What is best practices is fully adequate funding for a system where we accept every child, not just some of them, right? We educate children who don't speak English, children who are medically fragile. That's what public education is about. And so we need to fully fund that. And so that segues into kind of what our hot issue is today, and that is that local school funding. So largely our public schools are funded through property taxes. And so we know what it looks like when our schools are fully funded and they have everything we need. We also know what it looks like when they're not getting what they need. And instead, we are funding stadiums and parking garages and high-end housing for the wealthiest of our city. And so lots of these millions upon millions of dollars meant for public school budgets are literally diverted into those things that I just listed. It is unconscionable and shocking, the number. I just have to say, the teachers union commissioned a report from Good Jobs First. This is a national watchdog group that kind of monitors and looks into corporate subsidies and the use of public dollars for development. They have produced a report that they just gave us a draft of late last night. And we are going to be having a press conference on Monday afternoon in front of the Board of Education to reveal what we have been demanding, actually, that City Council and honestly the school board too, that these entities have a responsibility to the public to reveal, when we pass those school levies and we check that box, and Cincinnati is so generous. We are so generous to our schools. We pass those levies. We say yes to preschool promise. But we trust that those dollars are going to get to the kids and get to the schools. And what's been happening is that City Council and the mayor, in their decision-making, have diverted those dollars into, like I said, parking garages, tip funds, stadium thing, paying for things for a stadium, paying for the wealthiest neighborhoods of our city to give tax breaks to the wealthiest of our city. These are just proven. And so we have finally a report that really looked at, well, what is the actual impact of these tax breaks that city council gives out to our schools? And we actually have that number, and it is shocking. And it's a teaser. I'm not going to tell it to you right now because we really want to draw as much attention to this as possible. Why? Because we need to change the way we are diverting these dollars away from our schools. And so part of the advocacy work has been for years. We've been showing up to City Hall, demanding reform. You know, you may remember there was a big expansion of TIF districts under former Mayor Cranley. The teachers union was very vocal of our concerns about the impact on the funding, because again, this is property taxes being diverted into special funds that are at the neighborhood level that can then be used for certain projects. Dollars meant for our schools. There is a handout I brought in for those. So you can see this on the Hamilton County Property Search tab. You just go down to tax distribution, but I can also send this to you, Bill and Ed, if you ever email out, but it's essentially a pie chart that helps the public understand where does every dollar of your property taxes go. And this is all based on electoral decisions, right? These are levies. There's the zoo, there's mental health, there's indigent services, senior services, parks. And this big blue chunk is supposed to go to our public schools. And so the ballot initiative essentially addresses what council, and not just this council, but councils before them have refused to sort of fix, which is that our city right now is one of the hottest housing markets in the country. Houses are not staying on the market for very long at all. The tax abatement experiment worked, you know, for some, let's say it that way, because for many, they did not participate and did not benefit from the tax breaks. But overall, the housing market, the census has gone up, our schools enrollment is up, we are an attractive city. But what makes an attractive city? It is the institutions of our city, it's the cultural institutions, right? It's our schools, it's safety, it's safe and clean neighborhoods, right? And so we cannot continue to give away millions upon millions of dollars to incentivize a market that's already hot at the expense of our basic services of our city, right? So that's the basic message. And so there is, we just launched a ballot initiative. And again, this is sort of a last resort. This is an effort for citizens to compel politicians to change policy. We voted these folks in large part based on their promises that they would make reforms around equitable development and fairness. They call themselves a progressive bunch of Democrats, and yet they have continued. Just recently, they voted back in the perpetuation of what has been found to be racist tax abatement policy. And in fact, they're being sued right now for such. And so this ballot initiative, we are going to get it on the ballot with 5,000 good signatures of city voters, we hope. And then it will be a matter of the citizens to decide, do we want to continue the practice of giving tax breaks to the wealthiest of our cities in a few neighborhoods at the expense of public schools and all these other public services? And by the way, when they pay less, the rest of us pay more, right? So your tax bill is actually higher when 20 to 30% isn't paying their fair share. So there's a lot of parts to this, a lot of reasons why we shouldn't continue to do this anymore. And so at its very simple level, I will read the one sentence of our ballot initiative. It is that the city shall not approve or permit a tax abatement for any real property unless all residential units therein are affordable to households with an income equal to or below 80% of area median income for the city of Cincinnati. And the reason I emphasize the city is that a lot of times area median income, they use this sort of 12 county nebulous, big, huge area, but we're really focused on the realities of the area median incomes of Cincinnati folks. And let me just emphasize that for a Black individual in our city, the area median income is only $24,000 annual. And so when you hear city council members talk about, oh, these are abatements are a tool for pathways into home ownership for Black families, it's just not borne out. And in fact, there's evidence that shows that, in fact, when you have a high number of abatements in a neighborhood, the Black family numbers decrease and the white families increase. That is borne out in Evanston, Madisonville, Walnut Hills, and the list goes on. And so we're really excited about this because if we can get this to pass, it will stop the hemorrhaging of literally millions of dollars going out the door of City Hall in the form of tax breaks to the wealthiest, and finally restore that funding where it's supposed to go. Where our taxpayers said they wanted their money to go. When I vote for school levy, I'm not voting to give 3CDC a deal on their debt service on a parking garage for a hotel down by the convention center. That's not what I'm thinking I'm checking a box for, right? I'm checking a box for property taxes to go to schools and to go to seniors and to go to the library. So we need to be honest with voters, and we feel strongly that this is the right thing. This is a reform that will finally address the inequity, the injustice, and really the racism. And secondarily, there's all kinds of evidence to show that these abatements also exacerbate segregation, gentrification, and displacement. No question, the transformation of our neighborhoods in a way that many of us don't like, because our city has actually lost census of diversity. We're becoming a whiter, wealthier city, a city where regular working folks can't afford to live where they work, a less diverse city. And I believe that most of us don't like that direction. And we feel strongly that if you work and play in Cincinnati, you should be able to afford to live here and raise your family and send your kids to good funded schools. And that we should not be concerned about making sure millionaires and billionaires of our city have their generational wealth taken care of. And so I'll close with that. You know, we have just a few months to collect lots of valid city signatures. If you'd like to help get involved, our union offices are on Victory Parkway, 2368 Victory Parkway, Cincinnati Federation of Teachers union offices. We have lots of copies of this ballot initiative. We love your signature and your energy to get it done. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Michelle. You gave us a lot to think about, tremendous amount to think about. Do we have some questions that come through on?
Let's see.
I had one question, Bill, and I may have missed it when Eve presented this omnibus education bill, which is doing everything from eliminating the State Board of Education to telling us what size trash cans we should have in the classrooms. Any comments on that? Any sense of what's happening and what the impact of that might be?
You come up here. Why don't both of you?
You're both, yeah, why don't you both go up,
Why don't you both
sit
come
on the bench and give us good answers and help us understand.
Good answers. I think you've hit it. The omnibus bill is a garbage bag that everybody's put every wish and hope from the right into that garbage bag, and it will pass public vote houses eventually. And as it passes and gets implemented by the executive branch, the chair's review, and also by what I would call a emasculated ODE, Ohio Department of Ed, and also, as you know, maybe a missing, evaporating state school board to address the issue. You'll recall that just about 3 years ago, they tried to get rid of local schools And that didn't play as well as this is playing statewide. It does impact curriculum, it impacts operations. It also does a lot to remove discretionary spending at the local level as well, which is very, very important, because if you are precise and very specific about how money is to be spent, then the folks that are actually elected to help make that determination and represent the community and how they want that money to be spent is diminished. Some form of it will go through, some degree of it will be implemented, and I think it will only portend the future, the will, if you will, unless this gerrymandering is finished, because that's at the root of all evil in this country.
Just from the teacher standpoint and the board, what about the wines? I know how to teach everybody to read piece.
Well, I think that's lovely, and we will.
Is that consistent with
our
what-
classrooms so that he could come and teach all of our children, and each and every one of them, how to read. I never knew that somehow reading was going to become a political issue. I never knew it would become a partisan issue. And I will say that the First Lady of Ohio has done some very nice things very nice and very dedicated about books and about all the other kinds of things that we need to be focusing on. Literacy is a problem, no question about it. And we need to make that a big priority, as we have in our goals and guardrails and strategic plan. But for the governor to tell us that he knows, and we have all these wonderful professionals actually doing the work, I find it offensive, frankly.
Teacher's viewpoint on the reading or the bill?
Well, what we, our response to all of this is essentially that, like you both just said, it's politicizing the classroom unnecessarily, really for their own political purposes, to, sort of fuel these fires of culture wars, and using classrooms and the issues of the classroom to be that fuel. And it's very disruptive and destructive to the field. We are having problems recruiting young people into the field of teaching because they see it as, I'm going to be attacked, or it's treacherous, or it's even dangerous to get into this profession. So I just overall, it's almost overwhelming to constantly have to feel that you have to defend your own profession against what is just usually crazy talk.
Does this bill also talk about things like teaching Black history and that type of thing? Does it get into the classroom like they have in Florida?
Yeah, Bill, I'm not exactly sure if CRT, which is that new effort, critical race theory, but it does impact curriculum and does reemphasize standards. Now, here's something that's very important. Right now, our Ohio standards are strong and somewhat enlightened. The problem is going to be when the powerful folks get a taste of the blood, if you will, and they actually go after the specific curriculum. Because we are teaching standards, our Ohio curriculum is actually quite strong compared to many other states, but that's because of things like state school boards. It's because of the professionals being in charge of the administration in Columbus. It's because our clientele, our people, our taxpayers have insisted. It's also because we have one of the strongest liberal arts college systems in any state in this country. So there's a long, proud history of education attacking our curriculum. It'll be the last thing that they do, but they are moving in that direction. We are, I'm proud to say that I was the board member that introduced this, but it didn't take but a second because of the other 6 that say yes, and it certainly didn't take more than 4 seconds to get the administration to say that we embraced the College Board's concept some years ago of an AP course in African American history. We are teaching kids about who they are, regardless of who they are. And we're teaching the full picture, the full mosaic of America. Good, bad, ugly, glorious. And we should be proud of that. And we need our kids to be proud of that history, and most particularly proud of the history that has changed through activism, through commitment to something higher. So I'm very worried about the curricular piece being the next thing that they go after. But the other piece is social emotional education now, where everybody was talking about that and really focusing on it. And you've just noticed in the last 11 months, even in the state of Ohio, they now think the social emotional learning as some sort of woke concept, instead of actually teaching and caring and providing for our students, from the littlest people to the most challenging of the teenagers, and I like the best. I love teenagers, this is deeply. But that's when they start touching that, you know, we're in deep trouble.
We haven't banned any books that we.
Over 7 board members' bodies, and I know the entire leadership of all 6 unions in Cincinnati Public, as well as the history of this district. The history of this district, which I said is almost 200 years old, that is not going to happen. Who might go to jail? That's not going to happen.
Just. All right.
Some final words that you would like to leave.
Of course, I have a couple. I just want to reemphasize that so a lot of this can be overwhelming, especially the statewide stuff. It can feel that you're up against Goliath. Some of the things, though, are within our locus of control down here. And one of those things is our local funding issues. And so I just have to say, we really hope that the members of the Board of Education, as they've endorsed the statewide voucher lawsuit, similarly, they will embrace the efforts of the teachers union along with other community groups to embrace the ballot initiative efforts to say enough is enough of City Hall giving out. It's essentially, it's the school board's money, but because of the tax exemption policy ordinance, they literally have to, they're within an agreement where they have to agree to tax abatements in the case of commercial projects, right? Like stadiums and parking garages and big buildings. But in the case of the residential, with this ordinance, we can restrict City Hall from giving away our schools money. And we really look to the school board to endorse the effort, to support it, because it is the right thing to do, to get those dollars back to where they belong, which is in our classrooms. Similarly, we hope that City Council, while they've gone along with the mayor's reforms and seemed to understand the issue, but yet refuse to really make a change, that they will finally really do the right thing and stop, you know, sort of the discriminatory practices of their tax abatement programs as they stand, and embrace this reform that is citizen-led and endorse the project that says, if we want to incentivize something in the city with public dollars, let's at least incentivize affordable housing for the working poor. That's what we need, right? So this ballot initiative is actually complementary to the homeless coalitions and the CANS group. They also have a ballot initiative around affordable housing trust fund to make sure that's properly funded, because it never was with this council. So that's why that's coming back. And so this is a complementary effort where if we can both get affordable housing trust fund to be funded through the restoration of the earned income tax cut that happened in 2020, right? So we get a really robust pool of funding for true affordable housing construction. And then at the same time, we stop the incentives to the wealthiest in our city through abatements and use abatements only for new construction and upgrades to affordable housing. for truly working for and for folks, that can be transformational in the city. And elected progressive Democrats, at least, and really all officials should care about our people in the city and whether they can afford to live safely and affordably. And so we really are looking for widespread community support of these things. Thanks.
You do have a question here. Will you all please share links to the ballot initiative? Okay.
Yes,
I'll put it on our website, Air Inc.
okay, thank you.
Oh, you're having a press conference this coming Monday?
Yeah.
With this.
So the Board of Education's got probably a massive agenda at 5:30, but we're gonna stand in front of the Board of Education around 5 to release this report from Good Jobs First that really exposes the question of, are our schools being made whole? And we've known for a long time that they're really not in the case of abatements, and we'll have those findings on Monday.
Yeah, that's why.
Okay. I think, as many of you know, the board acts as a body, so individual board members may not be able to have particular opinions, especially after the board has decided. But I know that each individual board member is very appreciative of the work that CFT and the other unions and leadership on the Justice Coalition has been providing and fighting for those kids in our schools and fair and full funding. We appreciate it. And indeed, it does need to have some sort of difference between what has existed and what is being planned, especially as it pertains to residential, because that also impacts us. We want to see families in Cincinnati. We want to see children in Cincinnati. We want to see fair and full funding for schools, but we really want fair and full funding for housing in all of our neighborhoods within Cincinnati and the district. So we're very supportive of the effort that has been made thus far. And I will say one last thing as we move towards our bicentennial in the next few years. We are at a really exciting place in the district. We did bring in new leadership, a leader that is progressive and fascinated with the future. And also, we have been very supportive of the efforts that all of us have tried to make in order to envision the next future for CPS. And we encourage people to participate in the next several weeks. People will be invited as well as informed to participate in the last bit of our strategic plan, which is envisioning and also determining mission and also determining and forecasting the future. And it's kind of, we've done it sort of backward because we have this compelling and compounding issue of COVID and a change in administration. A lot of the actual implementation work has been done regarding instruction, and we applaud that. But right now we're coming to the community because the community owns our schools and their schools. And we are coming to get the vision, the mission, and the forecast. We have not had a new one since, I believe, 2017. So we look forward to hearing the community and then acting upon what the community is envisioning for us. Thank you.
We'd like to thank Michelle and Eve for their fine presentation. They've given us a tremendous amount of issues to think about, both locally and at the state level. And thank you again, and we will see you in several weeks. Thank you.